I love most about our Florida legislature is several things. One is we're term limited, and I think that forces everybody to really put a lot of emphasis on every session and not ever lose sight of the fact that it could be the last session, and we want to make the most of our time here. And so we do big things. We don't lock up like they do in Washington, D.C. and just campaign over issues, over their disagreements. We actually solve problems here. And so we recently passed off the House floor our COVID business liability protection bill. The Senate is combining that bill with a bill that does the similar things with different standards for healthcare providers. And they've combined that bill. We'll likely send that over to us to adopt, and then that bill would go over to the governor. But language that's essentially been worked through, and so I think we're in a good place with COVID liability, which is a big ticket item. I know for many of the people on the call, many small and medium and large businesses in the state of Florida. We obviously have a challenging budget. Apart from the billions that the federal government may be about to drop on us, we have recurring issues that we have to make sure we're dealing with. And so I think we're going to look at where we can tighten our belts. So look for a typically frugal House budget coming out here in the next couple of weeks. Don't let that surprise you. And then we'll work our way, with the Senate towards something that we send to the governor for his signature and review. Those are two really large issues that we have been dealing with. The speaker has talked about the importance of resiliency. I think the governor's talked about that as well. We're looking at some flooding issues that are more predominant in South Florida than they are necessarily in our area, but looking ahead with a peninsula as we are, to make sure that we are prepared for whatever's coming from an environmental standpoint, I think is important. And we're continuing to press forward on making sure students have customization in their education, their K-12 education. We're looking at how best to make sure that our higher education is aligned to work and available jobs, rather than giving a student a boatload of student debt and a degree that doesn't qualify them or prepare them for the future. How we do that has to be done in the right way, and we know people, when we talk about scholarships and that kind of stuff, get pretty excited, and we get that. But we'll work through it and try to make sure that we've got a bill that is presentable and something we'd be willing to send to the governor. And beyond that, I'd love to take, I think probably best to take questions. So we're talking about what you want to talk about rather than what I want to talk about. So I'd love to take some questions from the group.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, and for those on the call, please use the chat box, and you can put your questions in there, and I'll pose them to Representative Renner. In the meantime, I was curious if you could give us your thoughts on the House online sales tax bill, and also whether the revenue application towards the unemployment compensation fund, et cetera. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like what we've done with this. For those that aren't familiar with the Wayfair decision that addressed whether states could impose a tax for online sales, whether it goes to the legal, personal jurisdiction. If you have an out-of-state company selling into customers in Florida, do we have the ability to compel them to collect and remit sales tax on those sale of goods? It's a tax equity issue in my mind, where our brick and mortar Florida retailers are at a disadvantage to online sellers, and so it could be depending on whose estimates you believed, either in the hundreds of millions of dollars or as much as $1 billion in terms of revenue. At the same time, as some of you may already know, the current tax to employers per employee for the unemployment compensation trust fund is about $7. It would go up over the next 2 years to over $80. So more than a tenfold increase if we do nothing. And so I think the elegant and smart solution has been to implement Wayfair and send that to the governor, but with it, reduce or at least hold harmless our employers from what has been a devastating hit to that trust fund, and make sure we keep it level so that tax rate does not go up, that per employee tax rate does not go up, which to a labor intensive business could be really pretty significant, pretty devastating, and also slow our ability to rehire employees we want to bring back to work. So all of those things I think are important reasons for doing what we did and doing it in the way we did. And then obviously once that trust fund gets back to its normal level, we can look at other forms of tax relief or something that we can do with that in terms of infrastructure or something else for the good of the state. Thank you.
Yeah, as someone involved with a lot of brick and mortar, we see that as some, issue of equitability, and certainly the internet is no longer in its adolescent stage from a retail standpoint. It's competing with us on a day in, day out basis. So we appreciate your consideration of that and assistance. I have a question from Miriam regarding infrastructure. Miriam, you'd like to go ahead and pose that?
Yeah. Paul, I'm a firm believer on resiliency plan and flood planning, but infrastructure in Volusia and Flagler in such a way, in such a dire need of funding. You have interchanges like US 1 that you have fatality, over 20 fatalities the last 5 years. That requires a major funding for this infrastructure to be updated. Otherwise, not only flooding, but other issues are going to come about because of those. So while it's always about the balancing act, because I can tell you the flooding in South Florida and Miami Beach in particular is so bad that can consume all the funding for resiliency. That balance and it's so important, but most important is infrastructure dollars, and to bring to Volusia Flagler for our interchanges, for our A1A, for Seabreeze, that our economic development is at a halt because of all of that. So I just want to put it out there. I'll come and see you. I know that you always welcome me to come and have these conversations, but I want to put it there that as we talk about resiliency, we need to talk about infrastructure and correct the issues that we have and make them resilient. Thank you.
That's a great point, Miriam. And we made this with respect to water projects and the Everglades, as important and critical as it is. And I'm committed to helping the Everglades, be restored and what it needs to be. It's not the only water body or only critical area, and we've got a lot. The springs in Central Florida, the St. Johns River, the Halifax River, Indian River Lagoon. I mean, just all across the state. Obviously, we're a peninsula. Our beaches. There's a lot of infrastructure, critical infrastructure needs in that area, as well as in transportation, and you can be assured that I'm going to be on the lookout to make sure that is distributed equally. It's not, not necessarily asking for more than our fair share, but by God, we're going to ask for our fair share. So trust me when I say that. We'll do that for sure. And so I do realize that is a tendency. In part because of the population and the delegation size, that all roads lead in a particular direction when it comes to funding, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen.
And Paul, at this last second, I told the governor this. I said, you opened the faucet on Everglades. You're raising one road, and these $750 million that every year goes to Everglades. State of Florida is beyond Everglades. So he knows exactly how I feel. I'm all about Volusia and Flagler, and I have no mercy to explain that we don't need to become Everglades to get attention from Tallahassee. Right. So with that, thank you. I'll stay quiet now.
Thank you, Representative. I have a question in the chat box regarding any movement or momentum on commercial rent tax relief. And also any business-related insurance matters that you might want to comment on?
Yeah, we and the House and the Senate has obviously gone along with us, and we over the years have tried to kind of eat that elephant one bite at a time. It was almost near $2 billion in revenue, so it's not as if we can wave a magic wand and make it go away. When I was Ways and Means Chair, my recollection is a tenth of a point, not a point, but 1/10 of a point was about $30 million in recurring revenue loss, and so we have chipped away at it. Obviously, Wayfair is one way to bring equity to brick and mortar entities that are subject to sales tax. But I think we can, look at ways when the budget repairs to start, buying that down. Wayfair would have been one of those ways that we could have tied that in, but given what is a more immediate crisis with respect to unemployment compensation trust fund, the monies are going to be put there for the time being. But I think going forward, that would be a smart place to put some of those dollars and to go back to start buying that down so that our brick and mortar folks that do have leases are not punished, because we're an outlier in that regard.
Thank you. That's we see a lot of interest in that, and appreciate if you can keep it on your radar as conditions permit. I have another question on here from Fred Guzman regarding the Seminole Compact. Fred, would you like to ask that question?
Yes, thank you. Representative Renner, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to talk to you one-on-one. As you may know, the Seminole Compact bill, we hear that it's going to be introduced by the end of this week. The Seminole Compact has the potential to threaten about 47% of our business, not just Daytona and Orange City, but the other pari-mutuel card rooms in the state, which include Jacksonville, Orange Park. Formerly in the past iterations of the compact, the compact itself took away our ability to do designated player games. In the last one that did not get ratified, it gave us the designated player games, but they changed it where it limited the amount that could be wagered, the amount that could be won, which in essence, it virtually rendered it unplayable. So that's something heavily on our radar going forward as we get our hands on the compact and actually see what the negative impact is to the pari-mutuel businesses in Florida. We've been part of the social fabric of Florida since the 1920s. The other factor that's going to be coming up that's included in the sports compact is going to be sports wagering, how that's going to be carried out. As you may know, sports wagering it's in 75% of the states in this country. So in my opinion, it's inevitable that it's going to be coming to Florida. And what we ask is a level playing field, that we get to be an operator and not just an affiliate to the Seminoles. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. And what I say to a lot of legal clients, is, and when you go to mediation, the old adage that hogs get fed, pigs get slaughtered, and or pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. But when you're overly greedy in the negotiations, it results in a situation where not only do the Seminoles do well, but they look to put out of business their competition. And that's kind of my red line on these things. And I hope that's not where we'll head. I would pay close attention to it. I think the bill has more lift or movement than it has in past years. However, there's also the typical things you see in these gaming bills that ultimately wind up, causing them to fail in the end. But it's worth paying attention. I wouldn't sit back and think that your question doesn't suggest that you are, but to think that it's going to fail again this year, nothing's going to happen, something may happen. And due to Amendment 3, the tribe certainly thinks they are in a position where it's not so much, it's not as traditional a negotiating posture as we would otherwise have. And so that also puts pari-mutuels at a distinct disadvantage, at least as the Seminoles see it. And so I think you'd be wise to stay on top of that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We have a question from our own Cheryl Coxwell regarding data privacy. Cheryl, would you like to ask that?
Sure thing, and thank you for joining us this morning. There is a bill out there that is talking about data privacy and going to some of the measures that are taken in other states, particularly California standard, to protect the public, and that's understood. But there are some interesting pieces to that, in that similar to what you had with the ADA lawsuits, the kind of the drive-by lawsuits, it does appear that this bill would allow for a private right of action. So if there was a data breach of any type, I could sue the company that had the data breach on my behalf, but I could do that without having any actual damages. And so there's that makes it seem similar to what those ADA lawsuits did, where you'd have, a plaintiff's lawyer go to a business, see a problem, and file a suit on behalf of many customers without there being actual damages. And just wondered if you had any insight on the data privacy legislation.
Yeah, I think this is probably year one of that bill, meaning I don't see that bill going and passing and going to the governor. Sometimes we move bills and even pass bills for the purpose of forcing a conversation, and that could happen. But I don't suspect that in its current form that it's going to go to the governor. And with specific reference to the private cause of action, I would want it to have, more, actual damages as to the litigant, rather than, private attorneys general is not what we want. I know the attorney general would have some authority under that bill, whether we would also grant some authority to individuals and under what circumstances those should be limited. And so if they call it a limited cause of action, I'd want to see a more limited cause of action there. The other issue with the bill, I think, is it scoops up more businesses than is the intent. I think the idea here is if your business is solely monetizing people's personal data and doing so without their knowledge or consent, that they need to have knowledge, and they need to be able to consent or to withdraw their consent, rather, as in an opt-out, as opposed to a business that, I need, say it's my utility or my cable company or whatever, they need my information to process payment and so forth. They may share that with an affiliate. No big deal. And so we want to make sure we're limiting that to entities that are, where you're the product solely, and things are happening without you knowing about it that you wouldn't be okay with if you knew about it. So that's kind of, I think, where the good of the bill is. And so I think it'll take probably a couple of years to get it into a form that we'd all be proud to put it into law.
Well, that's good to hear. Appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Renner, you've been extremely generous with your time for our questions and such. Just like to give you the opportunity, if you would, if you have any particular bills or comments that you'd like to make, and then also if there's any opportunity for us locally to do things to help support you, we certainly are available for that.
No, I just think Florida's having a special moment in the sense that both the legislature and the governor tried to strike a balance between, combating a virus and keeping our lives and livelihoods going. And I think we did that successfully. I think we're on the back end of COVID, thankfully, and the front end of what I hope will be a boom in our economy, including our tourism economy getting back on its feet. Soon. I think we'll see some records next year. It's my prediction. But I think the bright days are ahead for Florida. We do have a lot of people, as a result of what's happening, that have voted with their feet. I hope they'll consider their vote when they come to Florida. But they voted with their feet in terms of wanting to get away from decisions that have been made in other states and embrace what we're doing here in Florida. What that means to me is that we need to think more about the future. We need to have a forward-looking vision for our as Miriam noted, our surface transportation infrastructure, our water infrastructure. our cybersecurity for state data. You know, we talk about data privacy. What about state data? The government forces you to turn over some data, and we've seen ransomware attacks on local city and county governments where they literally are stroking a check to organize, you know, crime operations that are holding their data hostage until they receive payment. Those kinds of things need to be addressed, and oftentimes in the legislature we scratch whatever today's itch is politically and don't look at the 5, 10, 20-year plan. So I think moving forward, that's something certainly I would like to have your input and support in. I think that means honestly assessing where we are in our infrastructure needs. It's going to be a staggering number. And when we do that, we start to focus back on what government's really supposed to do, which is protect lives and property and public safety, and do things like infrastructure that, you know, private actors aren't going to pay for. It makes less important the nice to have requests that we get all the time, which far exceed our ability in a balanced budget state to pay for. We really need to focus on making sure we remain a first world state. We're right now, in my mind, the best of the 50. I want to stay that way, and that one way to do that is maintain our quality of life by protecting our infrastructure.
Well, thank you so much. You're doing a great job for not only District 24, but for all the residents of the state of Florida. We appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you hopefully in person sometime soon. And thank you so much, sir.
Thanks very much. Have a good day, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.